On the panel, 2 chairs. I'm going to introduce the speaker. There's only one presentation, and then Isolino Oriano will chair the debate. 20 minutes for the presentation, and then we'll have more or less an hour for debate. The presentation is being given by Ms. Laurence Azoux-Bacrie. She is a lawyer in Paris, doctor in bioethics and biology, mediator at the Bar Association in Paris, the president of European Biomedicine. She's a member of the Council of the Board of Directors of the Bar Association in Paris. She's president of the Commission of Bioethics of the Order of Lawyers in 1997-2009. A commission created in 1996 under the leadership of Bâtonnet, led since its creation by Laurence, and later on until 2022. The objective of this commission is to gather together all people interested and any citizens interested in social debates, something similar to what the International Society of Bioethics carries on over the year with its different conferences on topics, current topics, which we have to reflect upon. Throughout the year, they organize presentations, debates on regulation, legislation in the world of health, to empower or raise the awareness of people so that they understand the risks. The Commission is also carrying out a review to protect the dignity of people in agreements with international instruments, such as the Agreement on Human Rights, 1997, that everybody is familiar with, and the Universal Declarations of Bioethics and Human Rights for 2005. They also often talk about decisions on the different stages of life, palliative care, euthanasia, the right to leave people to die in dignity, end-of-life stages, and the new risks for health that have become an important concern for all, and that it can occur, the use of drugs, pharmaceutical products, cosmetics, foodstuff, animal feed, and also related to working conditions, and of course in the environment. Related to this, she is going to give a talk on endocrine disruptors and the impact of the environment on youth and future generations. I give you the floor, Laurence, when you wish.
Buenas tardes a todos.
Good afternoon to you all.
I try. First of all, I want to wish my congratulations to Mr. President Palacios. It's a very great humanist, and for all his work inside the CB. And I want to thank you also very much, Beatrice, for all the travail inside the Secretary. Okay, now I have my contribution. It's endocrine disruptors, health, environmental, and scientific, ethical, and legal challenge. ED. ED entered the field of bioethics. My communications aims to encourage dialogue between scientists, lawyers, and civil society. Conflicts of interest are at the heart of the problem, whether it's the interest of the citizen, economic interest, opposing the protection of health and the protection of the environment, or private interest. You know perfectly that bioethics concern us all as patients or professionals, but also as members of a society facing new choices in the face of scientific developments. Bioethics, a social issue, cannot ignore the impact of ED and must reaffirm the fundamental rights linked to the human condition. Hot news is that the field of ED and their effects on the environment and health is transversal and international. It is at the crossroads of human rights, health, and the environment. I think that today the public is accountable for risk. It's up to the mediator in the field of health to act as a facilitator of communication to prevent upstream actions of group related to ED. What is ED? According to the World Health Organization, it's a chemical substance of natural or synthetic origin foreign to the body and likely to interfere with the functioning of the endocrine system. Its cells and organs involved in the production of hormones and their action on so-called target cells via receptor. This definition is about plastics, pesticide, food containers, receipt, many objects in our daily lives are likely to contain. ED are molecules that may block or alter the action of a hormone and disrupt the normal functioning of an organism. They can cause dysfunctions on several levels: reproduction, growth, development, or behavior. In addition to the impact on human health, this substance can also have environmental impacts. This precise and global definition is truly the only one that takes into account the proven risk, but also the potential risk. You know, in France, you have a legislation of bioethics since 1994, and has had legislation on bioethics is revised regularly in the light of progress and discoveries in biomedicine. In this period, the legislator indeed organized a statute of the human body, whose protection extends also the elements and products of the human body. This law defines in its Article 16 in the Code Civil that the rules relative to the respect of the human body it provides, the law ensures the primacy of the person, prohibits any attack on the dignity of this one, and guarantees the respect of the human being from the beginning of his life. Everyone has the right to respect for his body. The human body is inviolable. The human body, its element, and its products cannot be the object of a patrimonial right. This law lays three ethical foundations. First one, protection body integrity. It's very important. Second one, non-patrimoniality. It's the impossibility for the human body to be the object of a patrimonial right accessible in money. Finally, the requirement of consent. The consent of the human subject is total. This means that the person concerned must have the capacity to consent, and that she must have sufficient knowledge and understanding to enable her to make an informed decision. You know, you have also the Oviedo Convention. The Oviedo Convention 1997, which aims to protect the human rights and dignity of the human being with regard to the applications of biology and medicine. This binding convention affirms protection on three levels: that of the individual level, that of the society level, and that of the human species. In the field of ED, the citizen does not have this information. And this necessary transparency on product traceability to make an informed decision, because there is a hidden face of ED that is expertly maintained by the lobbies of chemistry. There is an infringement of the protection of its physical integrity. ED can generate inhuman and degrading treatment. You have the responsibility towards future generation. Bioethic is not only an ethic of the present for the present, but it's an ethic focused on the future. Thus, the idea of the responsibility towards future generations is emerging, popularized by the imperative of sustained development that it's usually translated as development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. So, ethical approach to eradicating ED is needed. It's clear that an ethical approach to eradicating ED is very needed. The quality of a society is measured by the way it treats the human consequences of these endocrine disruptors. Bioethics is the mirror of society. In France, we have a legislation of bisphenol A. Its law in 2010 prohibits the importation and placing on the market of any packaging, container, or utensil containing bisphenol A and intended to come into direct contact with foodstuff for infants and young children. We have another legislation of bisphenol A since December 2012, prohibiting the manufacture, import, export, and marketing of any food packaging containing bisphenol A. We have now a legal framework in the implementation of national priorities. In France, in Europe, and the rest of the world, ED risk assessment has become a current public health issue, which is obviously difficult to implement. We have in France now the third National Health and Environment Plan, 2015 to 2019. This third National Health of Environment reflects the government desire to reduce as much as possible the so-called ED that are very present in our environment. We have member states adopted on July 2017 the criteria for defining ED used in pesticide. The definition adopted also concerns suspected ED. That's an important step forward for health and for the environment. Pending the Commission's assessment of the provisions of the text leading to the exemption of certain substances acting as ED, France has also decided to initiate national measures as of now. Alors, the actions of national level. The government is strongly mobilized to reduce the exposure and risk, to improve transparency, strengthen consumer information, give more independence to health agencies for inform consumers of the dangers of substance to which they are exposed, study of the establishment of a labeling of the presence of ED in cosmetic, toys, food packaging. Inform the French so that they can make the right decisions, launching an information website on dangerous substances and a private public platform. Strengthen the capabilities of ED research at the national level. Protect the French from the possible harmful effects of bisphenol and strengthen training of health professionals on ED as part of continuing professional development. That's for France. Now the action taken at the European level. The European Commission plays the industrialist game. You know that the Council of Europe, oldest political organization on the continent, aims to guarantee the dignity of the nations and citizens of Europe by ensuring respect for the rule of law, democracy, and human rights. The European Union is part of this responsibility and must uphold democracy, even if it's more economic-oriented. The European Union is a responsible guarantor of the democracy and the life of the people, but privileging the economy to the detriment of the health by refusing to ban the member states, it flouts the democracy. It's complicit in the system of chemical lobbies. Two jurisprudences confirm this evolution. The Commission has been condemned by EU court for its inaction on ED by an application lodged on July 2014. Before the General Court of the European Union, Sweden has lodged inaction for failure to declare that in failing to adopt the acts provided in the regulation, the Commission has infringed that rule. We have another judgment of 17 May 28. The community judicator ruled in favor of BASF. It's a very important decision because now you know that Europe is not correct with this problem. Conclusion, the higher the risk, the greater the opacity. Something must obviously change and began to evolve with the actions carried out at national and international level. Community law is applicable in domestic law, and it applies in France directly. I want to say that I think it's important now to have perhaps a sort of ombudsman to have a look of this problem. And it's a recommendation. An ombudsman in the field of ED should be created to create a common cluster. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Laurence.
Thank you, Laurence, for your very interesting presentation. Now we open the floor to Q&A.
Bueno, mientras se va pensando.
We think of questions. I am going to take advantage to ask a few questions. I'm very interested in this topic of endocrine disruptors. I work in endocrinology for young children, and I can see the effects. And what you have just, what Ceferino has mentioned, his presentation, and also what you've mentioned, something which is essential, and that is consent. Consent to agree to be informed. The majority of the people, of consumers, have no knowledge about the consequences of the application of all of these products, such as the cosmetics that we use. They don't know the consequences of the use of cosmetics, especially young children. I would like you to explain in more detail the role of the European Union, because really it is postponing the prohibition due to the conflict of interest that exists. If you could explain a little bit more in detail about those aspects.
I think that the European Union, there is a lobby of chemistry, so it's very difficult to resist, and the jurisprudence show that they are not, comment on peut dire, oui, ils privilégient en réalité. Oui, ils privilégient en fait les intérêts économiques, ce qui est tout à fait regrettable, parce qu'ils doivent normalement faire attention aux droits de l'homme et aux générations futures, ce qui n'est pas actuellement le cas, puisqu'on a deux jurisprudences qui sont vraiment tout à fait défavorables aux citoyens lui-même pour privilégier les grandes sociétés comme BASF ou d'autres sociétés.
¿Se tradujo del francés? No, no. Claro, bueno, pues Laurence nos dijo que...
Well, Laurence mentioned that, in fact, the European Union, there are conflicts and they privilege certain groups who do some lobby so that some products are maintained and the principle of precaution is not applied. And that may affect future generations, which is very important.
Pablo?
Sí, sí.
I wanted to ask a question too about the precautionary principle, the principle of precaution. I work with breast cancer patients where the endocrine disruptors play a role. I did a master's degree, a good master's degree, that is, a good master's degree on breast cancer, the University of Madrid. It was a good master's degree. And I recall some of the presentations, the lectures we were given. Severino Maestro has been talking today about the effects of the electromagnetic fields on health. And in 1997, we heard about scientific evidence in animals, and we saw some products produced breast cancer. Some of those products had already been forbidden in some countries, such as Canada. The products used in making babies' bottles. In the United States, they weren't prohibited. They produce them and sell them to other countries. In Europe, they've only just recently been prohibited. And in some way, here we see a product where is there sufficient medical and scientific evidence to forbid its use, but 20 years go by before other countries forbid them, due maybe to lack of evidence. And nowadays they use different types of plastic to make babies' bottles or glass, as they used to do. And these new products that are replacing the parabens or the phthalates, are these products are these products harmless, or do we have to wait for another 20 years to know whether these new products also have effects? I wanted to ask you for the principle of precaution to be used, what level of evidence is required for the legislators?
Dice que es la Corte.
Her answer is that the European Parliament should force the countries to implement the legislation, and they're not doing so. I think what is happening, as Ceferino Maestro said, regarding what we are exposed to, we're not familiar, we do not know what we are exposed to. The same happens with the chemicals, and legislation is way behind. Maybe because there's a lot of conflict of interests, so there are countries that apply it and others that do not. But probably we should ask the European Union to be more, or to play a more decisive role, and to establish a difference. And independent institutions should put into practice what you've mentioned regarding the protection of the dignity of the body, patrimoniality, consent. How can we lobby for this to be effective?
The Court of European is the democracy. So if we have a jurisprudence, it's very important. The country must change the legislation. But the Union European is asked to the economic subject. So it's quite different. But now we must integrate that the problem of ED is very, very, very important, and and it's a real opacity of the information now.
Sí.
Buenas tardes.
Hello, good afternoon, good evening. I would like to congratulate the speaker for the concise and clear explanations, which is affecting all the countries. In Colombia, we've got a very serious problem regarding politics. There are products that have shown to cause problems to population, such as the asbestos. Asbestos is used to manufacture the roofs. This material causes lung cancer. There are doctors and scientists that have said this and have proven this. There are victims. But if you say that there are companies, people who do not permit a change to be made, this government, we got the glyphosate, which is going to be used again because it affects the crops and also people and the animals. And this is going to be permitted again. So what responsibility does the government have? There are people, population, who want to take care of themselves. They know the products that are harming them. But the government, instead of taking care of us, of informing us about the chemicals that cause harm, do the opposite because it doesn't interest them.
Ah bah, il faut faire des procès individuels. Il faut prouver les liens de causalité entre le dommage et la faute. Ça, tu peux le dire?
Sí.
She says that really we would have to try to prove the relationship that exists between the harm and the exposure, the harm that is caused to the people. And that would be the way that a change could be made. However, I would like to add that I believe it is important to draw attention to all of this, to inform the citizens, to inform the people, so that as civil society can demand changes. Because we can see the moratorium regarding the glyphosate, because there's a lot of pressure from industries, companies. There are a lot of interests involved. And so they give priority to economic aspects rather than the health of the people.
Action too, an association of citizens to make a class action for this problem. It's now possible in France. We have a law called la loi Hamon qui permet de faire a class action. De faire une class action. Une class action, ça veut dire un regroupement des citoyens pour faire un procès.
Que realmente somos los ciudadanos.
So in fact, we as citizens are the ones who have to mobilize to reach or to induce those changes, is what is called class action or collective changes or actions. Citizens have to disseminate information and get mobilized and organize mobilizations, because this is not an individual matter, but rather a matter of public health. So we have to mobilize to reach all those changes.
First of all, I would like to thank you for the presentation. My question is about the bisphenol. If there's a regulation in Spain regarding the receipts, I think from 2019, these have to disappear. The bisphenol will have to disappear from the receipts, but we must be careful with the substitutes, because in many studies we've seen that they can have the same consequences as bisphenol. I would like to know if there is any regulation in France on the substitutes of bisphenol A that exists in the receipts.
Tout à fait. Je ne sais pas, mais c'est un perturbateur endocrinien en tout cas. Elle a raison. You are right. Hein?
Mais en France, il est interdit.
Maintenant, oui. Maintenant, oui. Récemment. Récemment. Oui. It's forbidden in France now, but it's very recently.
Sí, dice que sí, que en Francia está prohibido.
She says that it's forbidden in France, and from what I've heard, Laurence, From what I've heard, it's considered as a professional disease, an occupational disease, as the cashiers in the supermarkets are young women who are in fertile age. That is why these have been forbidden in France. France was a pioneer with respect to that legislation. But here in Spain, for the moment, it is still used. As far as I know, it's the thermal printing that on the receipts. A lot of types of receipts. So I think it's the thermal printing that includes them.
There is a legislation very recently, 2012, and now it's forbidden to have the ED into, comment s'appelle, les tickets, onto the ticket of the, but it's recently. So in Spain, you must have associations and make action group action to have, it's a lobby for you. It's very important, I think. In France now is usual that lawyers make a group action.
Sí. ¿Alguna pregunta?
Any more questions? Teferino? Very quickly. Regulations come developed to control drugs, chemicals, etc. We are used to the European Council and Parliament approving things in this regard. The problem is that there's no inspection mechanism at all. The states in the European Union, the member states, should put into launch inspection actions. In Spain, we have the paradox that we have the declaration of responsibility. The manufacturer declares to be responsible for the manufacture, and the state only takes action if there is a report. The people, as the effect is in the mid-long term, continues to be contaminated. There are no inspection mechanisms that only act when the report is made. We have to have some sort of prevention inspection, controlling what is happening, regulations. In France, this is so-so, but in other countries, such as Italy, the declaration of responsibility has been used for a long time, but it's not used correctly. It's just a comment. I totally agree with you, and I think that one of the great problems is that to reach a certain level of scientific evidence which is necessary to have a regulation takes too long. In contrast, we don't apply the principle of precaution. And possibly many problems that we have regarding infertility, cancer, problems of early puberty, many of these problems are perhaps related, but we don't have the necessary scientific evidence required by the legislators and forbid the products, and that is why there is a lack of protection.
Lo curioso.
The curious thing here is that the legislators are demanding an enormous, a high level of evidence, and then we find jurisprudence that is ahead of the legislators. The glyphosate that I mentioned before, in the US, there's a ruling that it is approved that is a cause of disease, of cancer, in a person who worked as a gardener was exposed to this substance. So if there is sufficient evidence for a judge, but here we don't believe there is sufficient evidence to take political decisions or legal decisions on this other side of the Atlantic. So earlier on, before the break, we heard that in Brazil, the wealth of 5 people is more than the wealth of all those of half the population in Brazil. Why do they need to have so much? Maybe it's because there's more than evidence. There's a lot of money. And so there's a lot of greed. And these presentations are making me nervous because we're seeing a very dark or pessimistic future. Maybe we need to find more constructive solutions. Laurence has given us a few solutions that we must take into account. Indeed, forming associations can provide pressure so that to provide more information. Maybe it's not the actual solution, but it is minimally necessary.
An ombudsman, because the ombudsman make the relation and sensibilize the citizen. So I think it would be important to think about it.
Una última intervención.
With respect to what you were saying in the US, indeed, in the US, glyphosate has been eliminated altogether, but they send it to Colombia so that we can eradicate the illegal crops. And really, it's an obligation in this new government. The crops must be eliminated with glyphosate. But what is happening to our people, to the young people? Because this has been done by a sprinkling from helicopters. So it is falling on the crops, the potatoes, all different types of crops. There is scientific evidence. It has been shown that some external changes, like pollution, the food, cause an expression in the genes.
Emmanuel Macron said there is no law now, but he has an engagement to make a law until 2021. So it's an engagement, but there is no law now.
Sí, ¿se entendió? Sí. Bueno, pues si no hay más.
Well, if there are no more questions, we'll leave this to sleep on it and see how we can raise the awareness of people to try to promote changes, foster changes. It is a question of public health, and ethics has a lot to do with all of this. Thank you very much, Laurence, for your presentation. On my own behalf, and on behalf of Pablo, Marcelo Palacios, for allowing us to chair this round table. And thank you to all of you for being here and actively participating.